Hi guys, okay, once again welcome back to object oriented programming. Okay, and here we are going to discuss the key concepts about like Java generics, right? So okay, let's go back to the situation. Okay, so the key question everybody should ask before they start this Java generics is like, how will you manage if you want the same behavior for different kinds of classes, right? So the the answer can be, in the particular case we use the object references. Object as a reference are used, right, to accommodate any object type, but it is also possible. So the question like the key query was like, how will you manage, okay, how will you manage if you want the same behavior for different kind of classes, right? So yeah, the only way to manage the behavior for different kind of classes, if you want some kind of behavior for different kind of classes, we use generic classes and methods. Okay, and this we will deal in much in detail later on, okay, in the next, just in after some few minutes. And like you can see the example of our generic class. Okay, yeah, in the example of the generic class you can see a class, a product class with a generic type T. Okay, here it is highlighted with the yellow color, and it is something like uh, a product having a name and an ingredient with type string, whereas the ID can have generic type. Okay, so this is a generic type. Okay, the product class having the generic type ID. Okay, and whenever in such case, like if you are using if you want something that is generic, then you have to use a generic type, and you initialize it. Okay, you fill the constructors. Okay, here we fill the constructor on the same form, like a generic type is declared here or shown here. Okay, is used here, and then whenever also we are using the method to get the ID, we are also using the generic type here, right? Okay, now let's go to the next question. So how generic type declaration is done? Okay, this can be done in this way. Okay, like as I have shown you here, as the declaration, generic declaration is done in this form, like the public. This is a modifier, any modifier like public, private, or static, or abstract, or some anything else. This is a modifier, plus either you are declaring a class or an interface, then yeah, the name of the class or the name of the interface, and the parameters. Okay, parameters for the generic type. Okay, the generic parameters, okay, are declared in this um, angle bracket. Okay, and these parameters can be usually like the capital T stands for type, whereas capital E stands for element. Okay, and capital K stands for key. Yes, and the capital V stands for value, right? Okay, now jumping to the next question, like we can see, like what about using generics in the collection framework? Then collection framework, like previously I just did in the session 5, I discussed much in detail about the collection framework, right? And so what about using generics in this kind of framework? So as you can think about it here, what we can do in the collection framework is like, all the collection framework including which includes the interface and the classes, have been redefined already as generics. Okay, they are already redefined as a generic, so it can be easily used as a generic type. Okay, so while using generic, the declaration is okay. And also the second concept is like, okay, the question about the query about the using generics in collection framework is okay. Now what about the another idea? The idea is like, also you can check out like, while using generics, the declaration is longer, right? So declaration becomes very longer, and like you can see in the example, in student with generic type as an integer, a is object, student with a new like a is a reference to the student with a new object, okay, that is created of type integer, and the parameters are filled. Okay, this is something with the integer. Yeah, so right now if you just check out, like you can see without the generics, it's very easy, it's very simple. It's not a very the declaration of the reference is not so much long like before. Okay, this is without generics. But the good part is, the bad part was the declaration is longer, but the good part is like it's much more safe to use such kind of generic declaration, right? Okay, so okay, the good part is much more safer. So what are the extra advantages that happens like while using generics then? So advantage of using generics, like using generics in Java programming leads to safer programming. Safe programming, like here it's already discussed, more safe and more compact. So more compact means it's like more concrete, like more, it's more up to the point. Okay, and more easier to understand. Okay, it's like something is very easier to understand, like what is the generic type is an integer. Okay, and this leads to high performance. Okay, so now what is the diamond operator then? Diamond operator, as I have already specified, there was some angle bracket, right? So this, and inside the angle bracket where we specify the generic type is the diamond operator. Okay, and the key point to understand is like, whenever we declare a generic type, the class parameter as a reference, okay, to the class, and the parameter passed by this class. Okay, the generic types declared here must be same with the reference parameter. Okay, that is declared. The new object created here as a class. Okay, and the reference parameter are all must be same. Okay, this is a reference parameter. As a reference is a main is the reference of this object map, whereas the class is the tree map class is used here. Okay, and this is the class parameter, must be same, but also this can be used. Okay, so the new version is like we can also use we can just declare a reference parameter without just declaring the reference parameter. Also this can be used in coding. Yeah, so what are the bounded types then? We already knew about so many other things. So bounded types, bounded means like something that is has some kind of limit. Okay, some constraint. Okay, so if you go and check out, so bounded means having some kind of constraints in it. Okay, so when defining generic type, we can also express some kind of constraints. Okay, and these kinds of constraints are often called bounded types. Okay, and what kind of boundary, okay, the boundary line can be created in the generic type is like something like extends. Okay, means this generic type extends from another class. Okay, so any new class can be created, and this can be and this generic type can extend this new class, okay, new kind of class, right? So this means, okay, also you can just check the meaning. The meaning is class C can only be defined with the type derived from this generic type, okay, from this class B1 and or B2, okay. Whereas also another boundary line that can be created is, another constraint that can be created is like this generic type super D, okay. This means that can only be defined, this means class C can only be defined with the types that are super class of D, okay, including D also, right? Also not to be you should be also be careful about also D is included, okay, of superclass D, that are superclass of D, and also D itself. So including D and all the superclasses of D. So the boundary is just from D and the superclasses of D. This is just a way of like making coding easier, okay, in coding in the sense like making using generic type very easier, okay. This is just for to do such kind of activities. Okay, then the next, let's jump to the next question, like, okay, so how to handle the generic type with while using inheritance then? As you can see, like, inheritance means something we already have discussed before. Inheritance means there exists a subclass and a superclass. A subclass is something that is a new class, that imports some kind, like that takes, that inherits some kind of property from the superclass. So similarly with this concept that we have already came to know before, like we already have discussed before, we can also say that string is a subtype of object class, okay. This means we can okay, this is something like this, okay. You just take a meaning that a string is a subtype of object, but base, okay, this is the statement, okay. But in the case of generics, type, okay, we cannot use directly this, okay. In case of generic type, we cannot use directly this. That means having already said that the string is subtype of object, that doesn't mean that while using the list with the generic type string, it's not a subtype of a list, and having also the generic type object, so this is not a subtype of this object, right? So the inheritance doesn't work here, okay. In the case of generic type, there is the inheritance property cannot be used, okay. And the idea, the next, okay, now I have provided some kind of notes here, and this note says that something like generic type are invariant, okay. What is invariant? Invariant is something that is never changing. Never changing, okay. So we always try to substitute a more general super type references to a specific one. Generic type are invariant, never changing, okay. So we will try, it's like something that is very concrete, okay, something never changing, invariant. So we always try to substitute more general superclass reference to the specific one. And the second point to be noted is, like in case of arrays, okay, while using array, you must be always careful that there might be some kind of, while using uh, generic type in case of array, we can get some kind of runtime type class, okay, while using generic type in case of arrays, okay. Some runtime class can occur. So what is this wildcard? Okay, and what kind of cases can we use the wildcard? So wildcard, okay, are something that usually used when we have no constraint, okay. Like previously we had some kind of constraint, like I told you about something like having a constraint, in generic type, like this one. But okay, if you come in here, like when we have no kind of constraint, okay, in case of using generic type, yeah. Yeah, there was no such kind of constraint, right? Having no constraint, okay, while using the generic type. So while if there is no kind of constraint, then the easy method is using the simple method is just using a question mark sign, okay, and this is something that is a wildcard, okay. This works as a wildcard, okay. In case of, like, for example, you can say in case of collection, okay, the generic type sometimes fails to work, okay. So in this case, like, we use the wildcard, okay. Yeah, you can check out, like, even in case of wildcard, there can be some kind of bounded type, like some constant can be created, okay. Even within the wildcard, there is some kind of constant that is created, like previously we have discussed, like extends or super, okay, something like upper bound or lower bound, or having some kind of situation here, okay. Only subtype of B included, okay, or including also B, then also super type of D, okay, everything. And also here you can check out, like, without without any kind of boundary, or so how generic method is declared then? Okay, we have some certain like format here, okay, which is general format for declaring a generic method. That is, first we declare a modifiers, any kind of modifiers like private, public, protected, static, final, abstract, whereas the generic type is created, okay, with the dollar diamond operator, okay. Inside the diamond operator, we just keep the generic type. T stands for type, whereas the return type and the name of the method and the respective parameters it takes, right? You can also check out here the other kind of generic methods with boundary or without boundary, okay, with constraint, without constraints, everything is shown here. Okay, lastly I want to give you some information about the type erasers, okay. Like, this type erasers is mostly used while we are using generic type, okay. Then these are also these are mostly used by the Java compilers, okay. This is applied by the Java compilers, and what is done is, if the Java compiler replace all type of parameters in generic type, okay, with their bounds or object if the type parameters are unbounded. Okay, so these are all done by a Java compiler. Okay, and at the end what it does is it produces a bytecode. Okay, it compiles and produces a bytecode that contains of only some ordinary classes, interfaces and methods. Okay, and this Java compiler, what it can also do is it can also insert typecast, okay, if necessary, to preserve type safety, right? Okay, and it can also generate some kind of bridge method, okay, to preserve the polymorphism, that means to extend generic type, okay, some kind of polymorphism is having occurring in a same type occurring in a different form. Okay, so it creates a bridge method to preserve this kind of property of polymorphism in Java programming language, okay, in type. So lastly, discussing about the consequences it has using the type eraser is like compiler takes control, okay, only when the generic type is used. Okay, compiler cannot take control, okay, if no generic type is used. And as it is not possible to instantiate object, okay, of the generic parametric type, we cannot initialize any kind of object of a generic parametric type, and we also cannot implement two generic interfaces like initialized with a different types. Okay, using different types, okay, in an interface, okay, in generic interface with two different types cannot be initialized. Okay, we cannot implement this two generic type initialized with different types. Okay, this much is just for the Java generic, and then this much was for the session 6. Now we'll discuss much more about something later on in the upcoming session, right? Okay.